Hello and welcome to the news for Friday, September the 5th. And just a note, there will be no bulletin on Monday. Apologies for that, but personal circumstances mean I have to take the day off. Unless there is massive breaking news and people in handcuffs, that will be the only reason why we'll have to change plans. But apologies, I'll see you back here on Tuesday. In the meantime, a lot to get through today as usual. Let's cut now to a clip from Senator Alex Antic calling out what really happened at the rallies last weekend in relation to the National Socialist Network, also far right. How does that work? This idea of the convenience of this very, very small minority group somehow being in the thick of things amidst what we've revealed already this week.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. The March for Australia was an overwhelmingly peaceful event held across Australian capital cities last weekend. 99.9% of the attendees were there for the right reasons, expressing their frustration over the terrible state of the country. The participants were everyday Aussies from all backgrounds, united with a concern for the terrible state of the country and Australia's future. Then enter the appalling National Socialist Network, or the NSN, labelled far right by the media, but using the term socialist in their name, which always strikes me as being odd. Now, the NSN are a strange group, not face-tattooed overweight men like we've come to accept from these tights, but the oddly clean-cut, preppy-looking ones. As someone said to me the other day, seems like they're straight out of Central Casting. For the last few years, these men have been turning up to similar events every now and then, mostly masked, but sometimes not, but certainly right on cue. Well, why don't we know more about these people, and how come a group with so few numbers gets so much media attention? I think that's weird. And how come the leader of the group just happened to be in the area right as the Premier of Victoria conducted a press conference with multiple cameras around? Must just be an incredible coincidence. Their stunts seem almost like pantomime. One would say cartoon-like if the subject matter wasn't so appalling. It's very odd, actually, and none of it seems to make sense. But one thing's for sure, though, these people don't speak for the views and concerns of everyday Aussies. But that said, there's no doubt how useful they've been for the government, the media and the establishment that's hell-bent on trying to subdue a dissent of the growing in mainstream Australia about a country in decline. And I think that's odd.
Robert Kennedy Jr. has suffered the wrath of Democrats who are really just trying to prevent scrutiny because they don't want Kennedy's plans to become transparent getting out. Let's start this coverage with first Kennedy firing back after all of the attacks made against him.
We are the sickest country in the world. That's why we have to fire people at the CDC. They did not do their job. This was their job to keep us healthy.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
I need to fire some of those people to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Meanwhile, Senator Ron Wyden was throwing spears at Kennedy. Let's look at this interchange.
How many preventable child deaths are an acceptable sacrifice for enacting an agenda that I think is fundamentally cruel and defies common sense? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do I get a reply? Or, Senator, you've sat in that chair for how long? 20, 25 years, while the chronic disease in our children went up to 76%. And you said nothing. You never asked the question why it's happening. Why is this happening? Today, for the first time in 20 years, we learned that infant mortality has increased in our country. It's not because I came in here. It's because of what happened during the Biden administration that we're going to end.
I'm going to let Senator Wyden respond briefly to that, and then we're not going to go over like we just did.
This committee on a bipartisan basis. Colleagues, my cabinet secretary says that we have no interest in chronic care. Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Chairman, could we have regular order, please?
We are in the process of turning around the Medicare program with the chronic care bill that Chairman Hatch, when he was chairman in this committee.
Kennedy did have a chance to actually outline his plans and what he's trying to do. Let's listen in now.
We are ending gain-of-function research, child mutilation, and reducing animal testing. We are addressing cell phone use in schools, excessive screen time for youth, the lack of nutrition education in our medical schools, sickle cell anemia, hepatitis C, the East Palestine chemical spill, and many, many others. At FDA, we are now on track to approve more drugs this year than at any time in history. I'm also proud to say that HHS under President Trump is doing more with less. We have taken measures to fight waste, fraud, and abuse. Just by eliminating duplicative enrollments in CMS, we are saving taxpayers $14 billion a year. Meanwhile, we are expanding access for people who need it. We are ending racist diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and instead focusing on aiding low-income and vulnerable families, regardless of their race, which was the original intent of Title X. We're also pouring $1 billion into Head Start and the Administration for Children and Families. Compassion need not be the casualty of efficiency. I'd like to highlight some issues that have not gotten media attention. First, we are doing our part to fulfill the President's commitment to stop human trafficking, especially of children. We inherited a terrible humanitarian crisis from the previous administration with its open border policies, which allowed the appalling loss of 476,000 unaccompanied children. We have implemented policies now to ensure that that appalling tragedy can never happen again. We have knocked on 82,000 doors and located 22,000 of those children. I promise you that we will do more in the next 3 years. We are also addressing the disastrous health conditions in tribal communities on Native American reservations. I've met face-to-face with tribal leaders in dozens of communities and tribes in Alaska, Arizona, Idaho, New Mexico, and elsewhere. And I look forward to making HHS resources more available to those communities. One of the most significant initiatives under President Trump is the Rural Health Transformation Fund, part of the President's Big Beautiful Bill, which will provide the greatest investment of federal money into rural health care in history.
Meanwhile, Senator Maria Cantwell, she brought the graphs as yet another reason to drown out all forms of scrutiny.
The mRNA technology is about continuing the research to be ready for the next flu, influenza, the next pandemic, and you have to do the research.
I'm happy to have a detailed discussion with you about it. You're so wrong on your facts.
You're interrupting me, and sir, you're a charlatan. That's what you are. You're the ones who conflate chronic disease with the need for vaccines. The history on vaccines is very clear. This is the 20th century. That's how many people had vaccines and had illnesses. This is the 21st century. This is the decrease, 99% down to 100%. This is what was delivered with vaccines, and you don't want to support that. You don't want to support that evidence. So yes, the governors of the West, Washington, Oregon, and California, will take up the efficacy of science. Yes, the University of Washington will deliver the science that America will depend on, because you don't want to depend on it. And his own Surgeon General.
Fox News report, we hear from Dr. Oz, who starts to make sense of what RFK Jr. is up against, but we have to suffer through Elizabeth Warren first, so apologies for that one.
Take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. You just changed the classification of the COVID vaccine.
I'm not taking them away from people, Senator.
It takes it away if you can't get it from your pharmacist.
Well, most Americans are going to be able to get it from their pharmacy for free. I'm not taking them away. Everybody can get access to them.
No, they can't walk into a pharmacy the way they could last month and get access.
Honestly, Doc, that's one of 100 points I could ask you about. I don't know what the truth is. Will you straighten it out?
So let me share with you what's actually happening with vaccines in America. But I want to start off with the sort of the big overarching reality check on that political theater we witnessed. Secretary Kennedy fought appropriately hard for what he needs to be able to do to make Health and Human Services the powerful entity it has always been. We've got to put the human back at HHS. You start by putting together organizations that work cohesively. He put me in charge of CMS. We've done a great job making sure that insurance companies are paying the right amounts for the right products. FDA is led by Marty McCary. also an excellent leader. Both of us tenured faculty, as is Jay Bhattacharya, who runs NIH. So we've got excellent groups that are making progress dealing with the health crisis in America. The CDC needs to be in that group as well. What the Senate was supposed to be talking about was HHS budget, how is the progress moving with the improvement of health in America and making sure MAHA is healthy. Instead, it turned into what you're describing. But let's attack that very fundamental issue of vaccines. If vaccines are not a binary issue, in this status that we're living in right now, if you have one little tiny change you want to make to the schedule of the 72 doses of vaccines that you officially recommend that kids get, you're called an anti-vaxxer. What if you're in favor of every one of the vaccines, but you want to change the date where you give one of the vaccines? You're an anti-vaxxer. What the Secretary has insisted on is integrity and honesty. Get rid of the conflicts of interest. Ensure that you've got folks in there who don't always agree with each other on policy so they can fight it out, and you actually get a cohesive and sort of holistic approach to dealing with these problems. And let me also put to bed this one critical issue of access to vaccines. My agency, CMS, and again, I work for Secretary Kennedy, who's hired by the president, right, to make sure that we're his ambassadors doing the right thing for the American people. We will pay for COVID vaccines for Medicare beneficiaries, for folks over 65. If you're on Medicaid, your doctor wants to give you a vaccine, we will pay for them. So obviously there's commercial insurance companies, but they usually follow us. So this is a manufactured crisis that scares Americans who are already caught up in the throes of a crisis in chronic illness. Just before the Secretary took the stand today in the Senate Finance Committee hearing, the CDC released updated numbers on chronic disease. Bill, 76 million Americans have a chronic illness. That will bankrupt our country and it will kill our people. Obviously, the latter is more important, but since I'm in charge of insurance, I'll tell you, over half of the $1.7 trillion that we spend from Medicare and Medicaid to take care of Americans is for chronic illness. We have got to deal with this crisis, and the CDC has not played its role, whether from drift or design. We lived through a pandemic where we have 4% of the people, but 19% of the deaths. In what world is that success? If I were the Senate, I'd be insisting that Secretary Kennedy make changes. I'd be demanding that he attack the politicization of medicine and he focus on one fundamental reality, which is if you mix politics and medicine, you actually get politics. There is no more medicine left.
That came up in a big way in this exchange with Senator Ron Wyden on chronic diseases in children. Listen here.
This is about kids being pushed in harm's way by reckless and repeated decisions to get scientists and doctors out of the way and allow conspiracy theories to dictate this country's health policy.
Senator, you've sat in that chair for how long? 20, 25 years, while the chronic disease in our children went up to 76%. And you said nothing.
To your point, Dr. Oz.
And the reality is that if you actually push people on what's working for them, it's not about just getting vaccines. I mean, 10%, actually less than 10% now of kids in America are getting a COVID booster. Only a third of healthcare workers, people like me, doctors, nurses, who sort of know this stuff a little bit better maybe than the layperson, only a third of us are getting boosted with COVID. So what's happening with the advice that's traveling through the airwaves is not just a politicization, but a polluting of the integrity of the information. When Operation Warp Speed was started, it was a massive success for our country. And I do agree that President Trump should get the Nobel Prize for that. He should have back then, and maybe if he was a Democrat, he would have. But there's no question that in a wartime environment, we needed to move quickly. The data wasn't completely cleaned up. It wasn't the usual kind of studies that we would do. And it turned out that over time, we've evolved our thoughts around this. It wasn't that that was a bad move. It was a smart move, but it's got to be able to change, and that's what the Secretary's insisting on. He was wonderful today. I was very proud of him.
Well, there's a lot to talk about on this, and it will go on for some time. I wish we had more time. I hope you come back.
Meanwhile, J.D. Vance summed it up: when I see all these senators trying to lecture and gotcha Bobby Kennedy today, all I can think is you all support off-label, untested and irreversible hormonal therapies for children, mutilating our kids and enriching Big Pharma. You're full of shit, and everyone knows it. Meanwhile, Caroline Levitt weighed in. Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. is taking flack because he's over the target. The Trump administration is addressing root causes of chronic disease, embracing transparency in government, and championing gold standard science. Only the Democrats could attack that common sense effort. Meanwhile, in another Project Veritas, James O'Keefe undercover sting We're now going to hear from a character known as Joseph Schnitt as he explains in this usual romance dating scam sting in media what he thinks was going on at the DOJ in terms of covering up Republican names in the Epstein files that, of course, has Democrats all around the world screaming from the rooftops. Only, of course, the DOJ was able to release Schnitt's reply to his boss over actually what went down.
Well, those files do exist.
Yeah, thousands and thousands of pages of files. They'll redact every Republican or conservative person in those files, leave all the liberal, Democratic people in those files.
I think they visited that Maxwell person.
Yeah.
And also involved.
Got transferred to a minimum security prison too recently, which is against BOP policy because she's a convicted sex offender. They're offering her something to keep her on ship.
That was the acting deputy chief of the Office of Enforcement Operations, Joseph Schnitt, telling a stranger about the FBI and DOJ's handling of the Epstein files. Schnitt, who works at a high level inside the Department of Justice, goes on to comment on the inconsistent statements, special treatment of Ghislaine Maxwell, and the blatant backtracking on promises of transparency.
And what do you do for work here?
I work for the Department of Justice.
Okay.
Been there like 23 years. I'm an analyst. Internally, there's a lot of, even within the administration, there's internal conflict.
Oh, okay.
Like the head of FBI really wants it. Second in command at FBI has been like causing problems because he's like, no, these have to be released.
Yeah. So the FBI wants them out.
Yep, the top two guys there do.
And Bonnie does it.
I don't know what Bonnie wants. Bonnie wants whatever John wants.
Sure.
In response, the DOJ published this letter written by Joseph Schnitt to his boss, Acting Director Pollock. I met a woman named Skylar on Hinge dating app in July 2025. Her profile is no longer findable. We had 2 dates, August 4 and August 16. She claimed to be an au pair in Georgetown. She gave no clues that she was a reporter on recording our dates. Had I had a clue, the first date would have ended immediately and there never would have been a second one. My profile indicated I did government work, but did not specify for which agency. I never discussed what I do at DOJ. The comments I made were my own personal comments on what I've learned in the media and not from anything I've done or learned via work. I have no knowledge of the circumstances surrounding Miss Maxwell other than what is reported in the news. I also never divulged anything about what I do at work. I recall that she asked if I had any knowledge about Maxwell and I specifically said I only know what's been reported in the media. Joseph Schnitt, Acting Deputy Chief, Special Operations Unit, Office of Enforcement Operations. Meantime, President Trump has hosted 4 tech billionaires at a White House dinner, including Apple's CEO Tim Cook, Sam Altman from ChatGPT, Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. Here, Zuckerberg is asked a question about censorship in the UK. He's not listening, so the president has to weigh in.
You didn't think you'd get that question. He's looking at me saying, how the hell? He's saying, how did I get that question? If you'd like to answer, free speech.
Sorry, actually I wasn't paying attention. But
There seems to be a crackdown. The British government seems to be cracking down on social media posts, people being arrested for tweets, social posts. Just wondering how concerning that is to you, Mr. President, and Mr. Zuckerberg.
This is the beginning of your political career.
No, it's not.
I will just say that in terms of UK, strange things are happening over there. They are cracking down, and surprisingly so. And I've spoken to the Prime Minister, and let's see what happens. But it is a little bit different situation. I'm very surprised to see what's happening are you talking about the UK in particular, right? Yeah, I'm very surprised to see what's happening. Sad. It's not a good thing. Yeah, please.
Meantime, public enemy number 1, Bill Gates, he was there too, explaining himself in front of the audience. And just looking at the body language here, Trump is certainly playing both sides of the ledger. Does he have it in for Gates? Is Gates going to eventually be exposed, given that Gates and Kennedy were at odds when first Trump, in his first term, was going to look at a vaccine scrutiny? And Gates famously told him to call it off. And here we have Trump with Kennedy at the helm of the HHS, Bill Gates seemingly mortal enemy out there pushing tech. What is really going on? But when you listen to Gates, quite frightening, but then again, to the average ear, probably sounds legitimate. Take a look.
Well, I'm in the second phase of my career, giving away all the wonderful money that Satya's good work has helped multiply a lot. But I think the thing that ties my first career that I still spend some time on because AI is so phenomenal, and my second career is innovation, innovating in health in areas like vaccines or gene editing, and the President and I are talking about taking American innovation to the next level to cure and even eradicate some of these diseases. He mentioned polio, which is one that we're close. We don't need new science on that one. For some like HIV and sickle cell, we do need new science, but the U.S. Has the seeds that in the same way that Warp Speed took those seeds and put them together, I think something fantastic can be done. AI for our foundation is that we want a doctor for everyone in Africa through AI. We want farmers to have incredible advice and, kids to have a chance to learn. So the work being done by the people at this table is changing the world. It's, coming fast, so it's great. We all get together and talk about how the U.S. can lead in this key area and apply it even to the poorest outside the U.S. as well as to our great citizens. So thank you for incredible leadership, including getting this group together.
Thank you, Bill.
7 AFD politicians died within 2 weeks of each other before local elections, prompting party leaders to hint at foul play. Wolfgang Seitz dead at 59. 66-year-old Ralph Lang died on August 27. 59-year-old Stefan Berendis died unexpectedly on August 28. Wolfgang Klinger, 71, died unexpectedly on August 19. Hans Wackham Kind, 80, also died, and Reserve candidates Renee Herford and Patrick Tietze, according to Politico. Police told DPA news agency that the first 6 deaths were either from natural causes or the cause wasn't being divulged to preserve family privacy. Despite his distancing from speculation of any possible nefarious demise, several AFD leaders openly called foul play. AFD co-chairwoman Alice Weidel reposted a post from retired economist Stefan Homburg, who said the deaths were statistically almost impossible. The deaths prompted affected cities to invalidate early votes and scramble to reprint ballots before the September 14 elections. The deaths come as AFD sees a surge in the polls, with North Rhine-Westphalia representing one of its fastest-growing areas in Western Germany. The 18 million person state has seen the AFD grow from a measly 5.4% in May 22, the last time of the state, to 16.8% today. However, in this report from the Washington Examiner, one might presume that there is a real problem in Germany for the AFD party, judging by the reaction to this rally.
I'm currently in Berlin, Germany, covering the parliamentary elections set to take place on February 23rd. Today I went to a rally for Alternative for Germany, a right-wing party currently sitting in second place in the polls, but one that has been accused by both mainstream parties of being too extreme for modern German politics.
The hundreds of supporters in attendance were surrounded on multiple sides by an equal number of left-wing activists attempting to drown them out with horns, music, and furious chants. The narrow gap between the warring political groups was filled with dozens of stoic police officers in berets and bulletproof vests, clustered in groups and forming human walls along the fence dividing the parties. The AfD, the party currently occupying second place in German election polls with 22% support, boasted 4 party officials who did their best to ignore the cacophony coming from their detractors, even as AfD supporters taunted the Antifa gathering by displaying the German flag and posters of party leader Alice Weidel. Disruptors carrying communist flags, foam middle fingers, and handmade Antifa banners denouncing the AfD as Nazis attempted to shout down each speaker by yelling and blasting music from their designated protest area just a stone's throw away from the stage. The left-wing demonstrators shouted a variety of chants, but none as frequently and vocally as Nazis raus, or in English, Nazis out. This sentiment, a wish to expel those Germans who are perceived as intolerant, violent, and outright malicious, is echoed from the right towards the left just as vehemently. The AfD supporters in attendance cheered von Storch's speech, chanting back the same chant lobbied at them by Antifa, Nazis out, Nazis out.
Nazis raus! Nazis raus! Das ist unser
Meantime, what is this really all about? Why do we have independent news at all? Now, this show, as you know, is going to dig into what the mainstream is saying, because that's where the pushing, the shoving, and the molding takes place. Now, you can agitate from the fringes, and it doesn't get more fringe than what we've seen. And then we've seen how they use the fringes at the rallies, the Thomas Sowell crowd, to marginalise and to use that as a form of credentialism to remove all people that they can connect to it, even when you are entirely unconnected. That is why we look at what is happening in the mainstream and look for ways to challenge what is being said and to level up professionally against what is going on. The only way that we can challenge is to be considered equals on a level playing field, and that's why we have to be professional in what we do. It's also why, sadly, I have to ask you to subscribe to my channel, despite the fact that I give away at least 90% for free. And if you'd like to contribute, I would really appreciate the fact that you do that. You subscribe at channel51.com.au for $75 a year, and I will throw in qcitizen.net, which gives you access to hundreds of interviews, past and present, that you can have a look at, that get into some really big names, and there's consistently a whole bunch of interviews up there as well, so I really appreciate it. But at the end of the day, isn't it odd that those that are considered far right, well, right of centre, are simply saying we don't want our freedoms traded away out of fear? Because that's all it ever is, unless, of course, it's about convenience. Now, I don't need a digital ID to make my life more convenient. I will happily put my hand into my pocket, pull out a card and pay with it. Now, if the bank says it's too expensive to provide credit cards and therefore we're going to chip you once and for all under your skin, I'm sorry, but it's called a cost of doing business. Now, you might want to do it a certain way, but that doesn't cut it. And of course, we know the other ramifications of a digital ID, controllable, programmable currency. And I don't need more government in my life. I need a whole lot less. And that's the problem that we have here today, because both sides of politics will argue that they're right. But the progressives, the lefties, the Labours, the Democrats, etc., are absolutely hostile to the other side because we won't go along with what they want. The changing of the rules, the changing of the definitions to suit themselves. And then, of course, it leads down to this pathway all the way to immigration. And as I have played for you ad nauseum, Gavin Ashenden, who then describes it specifically, and he says, the globalists, the cultural Marxists, and those pushing for the Islamification of Europe, and by extension, the rest of the Western world, we are at a crossroads where those three groups eventually will have to fight amongst themselves for the eventual power. In the meantime, it is the West that is getting taken out, and we have a system of government in the UK with censorship. In Australia, the same thing with Albanese. They want to prevent scrutiny. We only played yesterday the story where Michelle Rowland is looking to scale back freedom of information requests simply by saying if it takes more than 40 hours to put the information together, we're not going to do it. And she justifies it, surprisingly, by saying frivolous claims. Now, is it frivolous if it takes more than 40 hours to put information together? And what is the point of having government that represents the people if the people can't scrutinise the government and are told to trust them? Well, that's why we are here, and that is why we are doing this form of news, to legitimise alternate, independent media. And I can't do it alone, even though that is how it is, but I really appreciate your input. People send me all sorts of articles and links. I'll just make this request. Instead of just sending a link to an article that you need me to read, please put in a sentence or a paragraph explaining what you've got out of it specifically so that that can streamline the approach. Because the best way that we can do news is if we all do it together. I'm happy to be the presenter and I'm pleased that you support me in that way. But of course, the best news has a whole lot of people in that newsroom out there, the digital newsroom, and a bunch of producers who are putting together great stories. And we can make this the best independent news source in the world. And hopefully next week I'll have something different to tell you about where we may take Channel 51 and the work that we're doing here. So I really appreciate that. Have a great weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, all the granddads and all the dads-to-be. And even if you're the dad of the puppy or the pussycat, it's your day as well. I'll tell you what, go celebrate. What's it going to be? A barbecue in this beautiful weather here in Australia. I don't know. Maybe that's what we're going to do at my place, but I can't wait to come back next Tuesday and let's see what's happening around the world. And I'll have some fresh interviews for you as well. Thanks everyone for your support. See you out on the next show.
News from around the world as it affects us at Channel 51. The latest interviews, the archives. The world is changing rapidly. Putting it all together. Buy one, get one free. Subscribe at channel51.com.au and get QCitizen.net for free. Daily news, twice weekly interviews, archive of hundreds of major interviews, special events. Thank you for supporting independent media.